A woman is judged in the blink of an eye. For Annalise Thorne, dressed in comfortable linen for a long-haul flight, that judgment came swiftly and harshly in the opulent, Ethelred Apex Lounge at JFK. They saw her faded tote bag, not the quiet confidence in her eyes. They saw her simple sandals, not the fact that she owned the very ground they stood on, metaphorically speaking. The crisp, condescending voice of the lounge manager, Geneviève Dubois, cut through the air. "You with the bag. Luggage help. Over here. Now." They thought she was a misplaced service worker. They had no idea they were speaking to the wife of Dominic Thorne, the CEO of Ethelred itself, and they had no idea they had just sealed their own fate. The Ethelred Apex Lounge at John F. Kennedy International Airport was a cathedral of modern luxury. Its floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of jumbo jets taking to the skies, silent and majestic, from behind the triple-paned, soundproofed glass. Inside, the air hummed with a quiet energy, the soft murmur of important conversations, the clink of ice in crystal tumblers, and the whisper-soft tread of staff on plush charcoal-grey carpeting. It was a sanctuary for the global elite, a curated space where every detail from the ambient lighting to the vintage of the complimentary champagne was designed to broadcast an aura of exclusivity and power. Annalise Thorne felt utterly out of place, and she loved it. While her husband Dominic was the architect of this empire, she was its quiet observer. An artist by trade and a minimalist by nature, Annalise found the trappings of wealth more burdensome than beautiful. She was flying to Florence for a small independent art exhibition featuring one of her sculptures. She had insisted on flying commercial, just as she always did when traveling alone. Dominic had laughed, booked her a first-class ticket, but respected her wish to navigate the airport experience on her own terms. Her terms meant comfort over couture. She wore loose cream-colored linen trousers, a simple grey t-shirt, and worn-in leather sandals that had molded perfectly to her feet over years of gallery walks and studio work. Her only luggage was a large, sturdy canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder, containing her sketchbook, a novel, a small bag of toiletries, and a change of clothes. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a simple, slightly messy bun, and her face was free of makeup. She looked less like the wife of a Fortune 500 CEO and more like a high school art teacher on a summer break. She found a vacant armchair in a quieter corner, sinking into its leather embrace with a contented sigh. From her tote, she pulled out her sketchbook and a charcoal pencil, the tools of her trade feeling far more familiar in her hand than the gold-plated Ethelred Apex membership card tucked away in her wallet. She began to sketch the elegant curve of a chaise lounge against the dramatic backdrop of the runway, losing herself in the interplay of light and shadow. That's when she first noticed them. A man and a woman, both impeccably dressed, striding through the lounge with an air of proprietary ownership. The woman, Geneviève Dubois, was the head of VIP client relations for Ethelred's East Coast operations. She was a vision in a severe but stunningly tailored navy blue dress, her blonde hair coiffed in a perfect chignon, her every movement sharp and precise. The man trailing a half step behind her was Patrick Keller, her ambitious and sycophantic junior manager. He wore a suit so crisp it looked like it could cut glass, and a desperate-to-impress smile was plastered on his face. The arrangements for Mr. Blackwood are confirmed. Patrick Geneviève said, her voice a low but piercing instrument of authority. He lands at 14, Zerzura. I want champagne on ice, the Bollinger, not the Verve. Ensure the car is a Mercedes S-Class, not the sedan they tried to give us last time. And for heaven's sake, make sure the new attendant knows not to speak unless spoken to. Of course, Geneviève. I've personally overseen every detail, Patrick replied, practically bowing. They were making a theatrical sweep of the lounge, their eyes scanning for imperfections with the predatory focus of hawks. Their gaze swept past Annalise, dismissing her instantly, their internal calculus registering irrelevant. Annalise simply smiled to herself and continued to sketch. It was a social experiment she often conducted, how the world treated you when stripped of the name Thorn. The experiment was about to yield its most dramatic results yet. A family clearly wealthy, but flustered by the chaos of travel, was attempting to settle into the suite of armchairs adjacent to Annalise. They had 2 young, restless children and an excess of carry-on luggage. One of their larger, heavier bags, a designer duffel that probably cost more than Annalise's entire outfit, was left awkwardly in the main walkway. Genevieve's eyes locked onto the bag with disdain. It was an imperfection, a disruption to her curated sanctuary. She looked around for a lounge attendant, but they were all busy serving other guests. Her impatient gaze then fell upon Annalise, who had just set her sketchbook down to take a sip of water. Genevieve saw the simple clothes, the lack of designer accessories, the unassuming posture. She didn't see a guest. She saw a staff member who was in her mind slacking off. She snapped her fingers, a sharp, ugly sound that cut through the lounge's quiet ambiance. "You," she called out, her voice dripping with condescension. Annalise looked up, initially thinking she was addressing someone behind her, but Genevieve's cold blue eyes were fixed directly on her. "Yes, you." With the bag, Genevieve clarified, gesturing vaguely towards Annalise's tote. She then pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the duffel bag on the floor. "Luggage help. Over here. Now. Move this. It's cluttering the walkway." The words hung in the air, thick and shocking. Patrick Keller snickered softly beside her, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Several nearby guests turned to look, their expressions a mixture of surprise and mild curiosity. The father of the flustered family started to apologize. "Oh, I'm so sorry, we can get that. The staff will handle it," Genevieve cut him off, not even gracing him with a glance. Her entire focus was on Annalise, an impatient arch to her eyebrow. She expected immediate, unquestioning compliance. Annalise felt a hot flush of shock then, a cold wave of disbelief. She had been mistaken for many things in her life, a student, a tourist, a gallery assistant. But never, not once, had she been addressed with such naked, dismissive contempt. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a judgment, a declaration that she was of a lower class, someone to be ordered around. For a fleeting second, she considered revealing herself. The ethyl-red Apex card was in her wallet. A single sentence, "My husband is Dominic Thorne," would vaporize Genevieve's smug superiority and replace it with groveling, terrified panic. But another instinct took over, an artist's curiosity, a quiet sense of dignity. To react with anger would be to descend to Genevieve's level. What would happen if she just played along? She wanted to see this ugliness through to its conclusion. Slowly, deliberately, Annalise stood up. She walked over to the heavy duffel bag. She didn't look at Genevieve. She bent down her knees, protesting slightly, and gripped the leather handles. The bag was heavier than it looked, filled with God knows what. With a grunt, she hefted it and moved it to the side, placing it neatly against the wall out of the way. As she straightened up, she finally met Genevieve's gaze. She said nothing. Her expression was neutral calm, revealing none of the turmoil within. Genevieve gave a curt, dismissive nod, as if Annalise had performed the most basic and expected of tasks. "See that you remain attentive," she said, her voice layered with warning. "We have a very important client arriving, and the standards in this lounge will not be compromised." With a final withering look, she turned and swept away Patrick, trotting dutifully in her wake. The moment was over. The other guests, sensing the microdrama had concluded, turned back to their conversations. Annalise walked back to her armchair, her hands trembling almost imperceptibly. She sat down, but the desire to sketch was gone. The charcoal pencil felt heavy and foreign in her hand. The humiliation was a physical thing, a bitter taste in her mouth, a cold knot in her stomach. It wasn't about moving a bag. It was about being rendered invisible, being reduced from a person to a function, a non-entity, a luggage help. She looked at her reflection in the dark screen of her phone. She saw her simple clothes, her plain face. She saw what Geneviève Dubois had seen, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a profound and painful disconnect between who she was and how the world perceived her. She gathered her things, her hands moving, with a stiff, unnatural precision. The sanctuary of the lounge now felt like a cage. She couldn't stay here. Not for another minute. She stood up and walked towards the exit, the condescending words echoing in her mind. "Luggage help. Over here. Now." The drive from JFK to their home in Greenwich, Connecticut, was usually a time of decompression for Annalise. The transition from the urban chaos of Queens to the leafy, winding roads of Fairfield County was a balm to her soul. But today, every red light felt like an accusation, every passing car a witness to her shame. The memory of Genevieve's sharp, dismissive command played on a loop in her head, each repetition peeling back another layer of her composure. It was the casual cruelty that stung the most, the absolute certainty in the woman's eyes that Annalise was beneath her, a piece of furniture to be ordered about. Annalise had always taken pride in her ability to move through the world unencumbered by the Thorn name. She had built her own career, earned her own accolades in the art world, and cherished her anonymity. Now that same anonymity felt like a vulnerability, a cloak that had allowed someone to strike at her core with impunity. By the time she pulled into the long gravel driveway of their home, a storm of emotions was raging inside her: anger, embarrassment, and a deep, unsettling sadness. Their house was not a sprawling, ostentatious mansion. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all clean lines, glass walls, and natural wood nestled seamlessly into a rocky, wooded landscape. It was a home designed for living and creating, not for impressing. It was a reflection of them. She entered through the side door that led directly into the kitchen, a wide open space with concrete countertops and professional-grade appliances that were more often used by Dominic than by her. He was standing at the large central island sleeves of his dress shirt, rolled up to his elbows, meticulously chopping vegetables for a salad. Dominic Thorne was a man who commanded boardrooms and moved markets, a titan of the logistics and technology industry. To the world, he was sharp, decisive, and relentlessly driven. But here in this kitchen, he was just her husband. He looked up the moment she entered, his intense grey eyes softening as they landed on her. His smile, however, faltered almost immediately. "Annalise." "What's wrong?" he asked, putting the knife down. He could read her better than anyone could detect the slightest shift in her emotional weather. "You look, I don't know." Shattered. The dam of her composure broke. Tears she hadn't even realized were welling up began to stream down her face. She dropped her tote bag on the floor and wrapped her arms around herself, as if to hold her splintering pieces together. Dominic was by her side, in an instant, his arms enveloping her in a warm, solid embrace. Hey, talk to me. What happened? Was it the flight? Are you okay?" She shook her head, her face buried in the familiar comfort of his shirt. Her voice was muffled and thick with emotion. "The lounge, the Apex lounge at JFK." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his expression now laced with serious concern. "What happened in my lounge?" Taking a shaky breath, Annalise recounted the entire incident. She told him about Genevieve Dubois and Patrick Keller, their imperious attitudes, and the way they had scanned the room. She described the flustered family, the misplaced bag. And then her voice, cracking, she repeated the words that had been branded into her mind. She called me luggage help. She snapped her fingers at me, Dom. She told me to move a bag for another guest, and then warned me to remain attentive for some important client. Dominic's expression transformed. The warmth in his eyes evaporated, replaced by something cold and hard, like polished steel. His jaw tightened, and a muscle feathered along his cheek. It was a look Annalise had seen only a handful of times, usually moments before he dismantled a competitor or fired an underperforming executive. It was a look of controlled, calculated fury. He said nothing for a long moment, simply stroking her hair as she collected herself. His silence was more menacing than any outburst could have been. What were their names again? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. The woman was Genevieve Dubois. The man with her, Patrick Keller. Annalise said, wiping her eyes. Dom, it was awful. It was the way she looked at me like I was nothing, like I wasn't even a person. I know, he said, his voice a low growl. He led her to a stool by the island and poured her a glass of water, his movements precise and deliberate. And this Mr. Blackwood they were so concerned about. Alistair Blackwood from Blackwood Capital, I think so. She said the name Blackwood. Dominic nodded slowly. Alistair Blackwood was a potential investor Ethelred had been courting for months, a deal worth hundreds of millions. It explained Genevieve's high-strung behavior, but it didn't excuse it. Nothing could. I'm so sorry this happened to you, Annalise, he said, his voice softening again as he looked at her, but the steel remained in his eyes. No one should be treated that way. Least of all in a place that bears my company's name, and most of all you. What are you going to do? She asked, a little nervously. Please don't make a huge scene. I don't want... A scene, he interrupted, gently. No. A scene is messy and loud. This requires something more methodical. Firing them would be easy. It would be over in 5 minutes. They'd be embarrassed, but they wouldn't learn anything. They wouldn't understand the depth of their mistake. He began to pace the length of the kitchen, his mind clearly working, assembling a plan. This isn't just about them insulting my wife, Annalise. That's the part that makes me want to tear down walls. But from a business perspective, this is a symptom of a much deeper disease. Arrogance. A culture of contempt. If they treat someone they think is a service worker that way, how do they treat our actual cleaners, our baggage handlers, our junior staff, the people this company is built on? He stopped and looked at her. They've created a rot in the heart of our hospitality division. A rot I didn't see. And for that, I'm responsible. So I'm not just going to fire them. I'm going to conduct a surgery. I'm going to expose the infection for everyone to see. They built their little kingdom on the idea of status and superiority. I'm going to use that very kingdom to bring them down, and they will never ever see it coming. Annalise watched him, her own anger beginning to be replaced by a sense of awe at his strategic coldness. This was the Dominic Thorne the business world knew and feared. He wasn't just going to get revenge for his wife. He was going to defend the integrity of his entire organization. They went to great lengths to prepare for a very important person, Dominic said with a grim smile. Well, they're about to meet one, but she won't be who they expect. The following Monday morning, an email landed in the inboxes of all senior management at Ethelred Logistics East Coast Division. It was from Dominic Thorne. The memo was brief and impactful, announcing a new top-priority corporate initiative, Project Empathy. The memo spoke of reinforcing the company's core values of ensuring that every client partner and employee felt seen, heard, and respected, regardless of their status. It outlined a comprehensive review of customer-facing protocols, staff training, and management culture. And it announced that a special consultant had been brought in to lead the project, a third-party expert in corporate culture and human-centric design, Dr. Anya Sharma. A significant bonus pool was allocated for the division that demonstrated the most improvement and alignment with the project's goals. In her office overlooking the VIP check-in area, Genevieve Dubois read the email with a cynical sneer. Project Empathy, she scoffed, taking a sip of her perfectly brewed macchiato. More corporate fluff from on high. Dominic Thorne gets one sentimental bug in his ear, and now we all have to waste weeks holding hands and singing Kumbaya. Patrick Keller, perched on the edge of the chair opposite her desk, nodded vigorously. It's absurd, Genevieve. Our division has the highest profit margins. Our client satisfaction scores among clients who matter, that is, are impeccable. We don't need to be taught empathy. Exactly, Genevieve said, tapping a dismissive finger on her monitor. This Dr. Anya Sharma is probably some washed-up academic who'll have us doing trust falls. We'll play along, of course. We'll tick the boxes and write a glowing report, but our real work managing high-value assets like Alistair Blackwood will continue as always. Let the other departments grovel for their empathy bonus. We deal in results, not feelings. What Genevieve and Patrick didn't know was that Dr. Anya Sharma was a carefully constructed fiction. Anya was Annalise's middle name, and Sharma was her mother's maiden name. Her doctorate was real in art history, not corporate psychology, but the title added a veneer of academic authority that Dominic knew would be just plausible enough. Annalise was going back into the lion's den, not as a guest or a victim, but as an auditor. Simultaneously, Dominic had made a quiet call to Brenda Walsh, the formidable and impeccably discreet head of Human Resources and Internal Affairs. Brenda had been with Ethelred since its early days and was fiercely loyal to Dominic, not just as a CEO, but as a person. Brenda Dominic had said over the phone, his tone grave. I need a deep and completely off-the-books look into the VIP Client Relations Division at JFK, specifically Genevieve Dubois and Patrick Keller. Is there a specific complaint? Dom Brenda asked, her voice all business. There was an incident, Dominic said, carefully choosing not to reveal Annalise's involvement. To ensure the investigation was pure, Annalise had to remain an anonymous catalyst. A high-value associate of the company was treated very poorly in the Apex Lounge. They witnessed a culture of extreme arrogance from management that disturbed them greatly. They wished to remain anonymous, but the complaint was credible enough that I want to see what's under the rock. I'll start immediately, Brenda said, without hesitation. I'll begin with a standard financial audit of their divisional expenses. It's the easiest way in without raising suspicion. The trap was set. 2 prongs of attack, both invisible to their targets. The next day, Dr. Anya Sharma arrived at the Ethelred offices. Annalise had traded her linen travel clothes for a professional but understated look. Tailored black trousers, a simple silk blouse, low-heeled loafers, and a pair of chic non-prescription glasses to alter her appearance subtly. Her hair was down, styled professionally. She carried a leather satchel instead of her canvas tote. She looked the part, intelligent, observant, and unassuming. Her first meeting was with Genevieve and Patrick. They greeted her with a practiced, superficial warmth that didn't reach their eyes. Dr. Sharma, a pleasure, Genevieve said, shaking her hand with a grip that was firm but brief. We're very intrigued by Project Empathy. Please tell us how we can help you with your research. The goal is simply to observe and understand Annalise said her voice calm and even. She had rehearsed this, channeling the dispassionate tone of a researcher. "I'd like to be a fly on the wall for a few weeks, shadow your team, speak with your staff at all levels, and get a feel for the day-to-day culture." Patrick chimed in. "Our team is an open book. You'll find we operate with the utmost professionalism. Our standards are frankly the highest in the industry." "I look forward to seeing that firsthand," Annalise replied with a small, unreadable smile. For the next 2 weeks, Annalise became a quiet presence in the VIP division. She sat in on team meetings, where Genevieve dominated the conversation and publicly belittled a junior attendant for using the wrong brand of mineral water. She shadowed Patrick as he berated a valet for being 30 seconds late with a client's car. They were so convinced of their own superiority and so dismissive of her fluffy project that they made no effort to hide their true natures. They saw her not as a threat, but as a tedious corporate hurdle to be politely ignored. Annalise spoke with everyone: the caterers, the cleaners, the check-in staff, the drivers. At first, they were hesitant, fearful of retribution from Genevieve, but Annalise's gentle demeanor and genuine interest slowly earned their trust. She didn't ask leading questions. She just listened. She heard stories of junior staff being brought to tears by Genevieve's verbal tirades. She learned that Patrick had a habit of losing the paperwork for overtime pay for the cleaning crew. A young attendant told, her voice trembling, how Genevieve had threatened to have her fired for offering a blanket to a shivering elderly passenger in first class because it messed up the aesthetic of the cabin. The rot Dominic had spoken of was worse than they had imagined. It wasn't just arrogance. It was a culture of fear and cruelty carefully cultivated to maintain Genevieve's absolute control. Annalise documented everything in a private journal, her artist's eye for detail, capturing the nuance of every whispered confession and every scornful glance. While Annalise was gathering qualitative data on the division's toxic culture, Brenda Walsh was digging into the quantitative, and she was finding something far more sinister than petty tyranny. The expense reports for the VIP division were a work of fiction. There were charges for client gifts from boutique stores that had closed years ago, invoices for catered dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants on nights when the clients in question were on different continents. And most alarmingly, there was a consistent and massively inflated billing pattern from a specific third-party vendor, a high-end car service called Prestige Automotive. Brenda did some digging. Prestige Automotive was a small, barely solvent company until 2 years ago, right when Genevieve Dubois was promoted to her current role. Now it was Ethelred's sole exclusive provider for VIP transport on the East Coast, billing them for millions of dollars a year at rates nearly double the industry standard. Brenda presented her initial findings to Dominic in his private study. "The paper trail is almost too clean, Dom," she said, pointing to a spreadsheet. "The invoices are perfect. The approvals are all signed by Genevieve with Patrick as a secondary. But the numbers don't lie. They're bleeding the company dry. I think it's a kickback scheme." Dominic looked at the data, his face grim. "They're not just arrogant. They're thieves. It gets worse," Brenda said, handing him another file. "I ran a check on the owner of Prestige Automotive, a man named Martin Finch. I couldn't find much until I cross-referenced him with Genevieve Dubois' personal records. Martin Finch is her brother-in-law." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The cruelty Annalise had experienced wasn't just a character flaw. It was the byproduct of an unassailable arrogance, the kind that grows in people who believe they are untouchable, who believe they have gotten away with something big. Their contempt for a woman in simple clothes was a reflection of their contempt for the entire system they were defrauding. They weren't just mistreating the staff. They were stealing from them, from the company, from Dominic himself. The trap was no longer just about teaching a lesson in humility. It had become a criminal investigation, and the final act was about to begin. The deeper Annalise and Brenda dug, the more tangled the web of deceit became. The kickback scheme with Prestige Automotive was the main artery of the fraud, but it had countless smaller veins. Annalise, in her role as the unassuming Dr. Sharma, began to notice patterns that a purely financial audit might miss. During a casual chat in the staff break room, a young nervous concierge named Ben let something slip. He was lamenting the difficulty of procuring specific rare items for high-profile guests. It used to be easier. Ben sighed, stirring his coffee. We had a list of approved local vendors. But for the last year or so, Ms. Dubois insists we source everything, flowers, vintage wines, even specific types of Belgian chocolates, through one single supplier, Elan Imports. Annalise, feigning academic curiosity, made a note. Elan Imports. Are they particularly reliable? Ben shrugged, lowering his voice. They're reliable at overcharging, that's for sure. The invoices are astronomical, and half the time the quality isn't even that good. Last month we ordered a case of 1982 Mouton Rothschild for Mr. Blackwood's pre-arrival suite, and what we got was... well, it wasn't that. Patrick told me to just sign for it and not ask questions. Annalise felt a chill. They weren't just billing for phantom services. They were actively substituting high-end goods with cheaper counterfeits and pocketing the difference. They were defrauding the company and cheating its most valuable clients. The incident with the wine for Alistair Blackwood was particularly galling. It was the very client Genevieve had used as a pretext for her tyrannical behavior. That evening, Annalise presented her findings to Dominic. They're running a full-blown counterfeit operation from inside the VIP lounge. Dom, she said, pacing his study. They're leveraging the Ethelred name and budget to fund their own black market. The arrogance I saw, it comes from a place of deep-seated corruption. They think they're untouchable. Dominic listened, his expression a mask of cold fury. Brenda found the connection between Prestige Automotive and Genevieve's brother-in-law, this Elan Imports. I'll have her team run a check on it first thing in the morning. As predicted, Brenda's investigation revealed that Elan Imports was a shell corporation registered to an address that turned out to be a P.O. box. The sole director listed on the paperwork was one Patricia Keller, Patrick Keller's mother. The two managers had not only built a system of kickbacks, but had also involved their own families in the criminal enterprise. The twist, however, went even deeper. While investigating the finances of Elan Imports, Brenda's forensic accounting team stumbled upon a recurring payment, a monthly transfer of a significant sum to a numbered account in the Cayman Islands. This was beyond simple kickbacks. This was professional money laundering. But where was that money going? The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Annalise, continuing her empathy interviews, sat down with a quiet IT technician who had been with the company for a decade. He was responsible for maintaining the secure networks within the Apex Lounge. Initially reluctant to speak, he eventually opened up to Annalise's gentle, non-judgmental questioning. There's something that's bothered me for a while, the technician, a man named George, admitted. Ms. Dubois and Mr. Keller often request network privacy maintenance in the main VIP conference suite, usually late at night. They insist on being the only ones present. They say it's for sensitive client calls, but the security protocols they ask me to disable are excessive. It's almost like they don't want any internal digital record of their meetings. Annalise's heart quickened. What kind of protocols? The internal firewall that monitors data packets leaving our network. They have me bypass it for the duration of their meetings. I've logged my concerns in the IT reports, but they're always dismissed by Patrick as overzealous security. This was the missing piece. This was the final devastating twist. They weren't just stealing money, they were stealing data. Dominic immediately tasked Ethelred's elite cybersecurity team with a clandestine deep dive. Working overnight, they analyzed historical data flows from the times George had noted. What they found was horrifying. During those late-night sessions, large encrypted data packets were being transferred from the Ethelred servers to an external IP address. An IP address the security team traced back to Ethelred's biggest competitor, Meridian Global Logistics. The full picture slammed into focus with the force of a physical blow. The fraud, the kickbacks, the counterfeit goods, they were all just a smokescreen, a way to fund and facilitate the real crime. Genevieve and Patrick were corporate spies. They were selling sensitive Ethelred data client lists, shipping routes, pricing strategies, and upcoming bids for major contracts. The money in the Cayman Islands wasn't just kickbacks, it was payment for corporate espionage. The Alistair Blackwood deal, the one Genevieve was so obsessed with, suddenly made perfect sense. They weren't just trying to impress him, they were likely mining his visit for information to sell to Meridian. Her contemptuous treatment of Annalise wasn't just classism. It was the panicked lashing out of a traitor, terrified that any imperfection, any loose thread could lead to the unraveling of her entire criminal conspiracy. She wasn't just protecting her job, she was protecting her multi-million-dollar treason. Dominic sat at his desk, the final report from the cybersecurity team glowing on his monitor. Annalise stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. The initial sting of her personal humiliation had been supplanted by a profound sense of shock and betrayal. "They've been selling this company out from the inside," Dominic said, his voice barely a whisper, yet carrying the weight of utter condemnation. "Every contract we've lost to Meridian in the last 2 years, every surprisingly competitive bid they've made, it was them. They've been arming our enemy." He looked at Annalise, his eyes filled with a grim resolution. "The meeting is tomorrow. Alistair Blackwood will be there. Brenda will be there. And you will be there." "As Dr. Sharma?" Annalise asked. "You'll start as Dr. Sharma," Dominic replied, a dark fire in his eyes. "But you will end it as Annalise Thorne. They built their empire on lies and deceit, by judging people by their cover. It's only fitting that their downfall comes from the person they so colossally misjudged." The main boardroom on the 50th floor of Ethelred Tower was a space designed to project power. A single massive slab of polished mahogany served as the table surrounded by 20 leather chairs. One entire wall was a sheet of glass, offering a breathtaking, godlike view of the Manhattan skyline. It was here that fates were decided and fortunes were made or lost. Genevieve Dubois and Patrick Keller entered the room with an air of supreme confidence. They had been summoned to a final review of the Blackwood Capital Engagement and VIP Division performance, and they saw it as their victory lap. Their handling of Alistair Blackwood's visit had been in their minds flawless. They expected commendations, perhaps even a promotion for Genevieve. They were slightly surprised to see not just Dominic Thorne at the head of the table, but also Alistair Blackwood himself, a formidable man, with silver hair and shrewd eyes. Brenda Walsh, the stoic head of HR, was seated to Dominic's left, a thick binder in front of her. Tucked away in a chair against the wall like a secretary waiting to take notes was Dr. Anya Sharma. Genevieve gave her a brief, dismissive nod, a silent acknowledgement of the empathy consultant's peripheral presence. "Genevieve, Patrick, thank you for coming." Dominic began his tone, neutral, almost pleasant. "Alistair, thank you for joining us. We're here today to discuss the outstanding performance of our VIP division. Genevieve preened. "Thank you, Dominic. We strive for excellence. I trust Mr. Blackwood's experience was second to none." It was certainly memorable. Alistair Blackwood said, his voice a low baritone that held an ambiguous edge. "Indeed," Dominic continued smoothly. "Your division's profitability is remarkable, almost unbelievably so, which brings me to my first point. Dr. Sharma, you've been embedded in the division for several weeks now, as part of Project Empathy. Perhaps you could share some of your initial cultural findings." All eyes turned to Annalise. Genevieve's expression soured, slightly annoyed by this detour into corporate fluff. Annalise stood up, her leather satchel in hand. She walked calmly to the front of the room. She was no longer the humbled woman from the lounge, nor the meek researcher. There was a new authority in her stance. "Thank you, Dominic." She began, her voice clear and steady, filling the large room. "My findings indicate a culture that is indeed highly results-driven. However, this focus on results has created an environment of profound toxicity. It's a culture built on fear, intimidation, and a complete disregard for the company's foundational values of respect and integrity." She recounted without emotion the stories she had heard from the junior staff, the verbal abuse, the threats, the suppressed overtime. Genevieve let out a short, sharp laugh. "With all due respect, Doctor, this is absurd. You've been talking to disgruntled support staff. We are responsible for multi-million-dollar clients, not coddling the feelings of the cleaning crew. Our methods get results." "Ah, yes, the results," Dominic interjected, his voice losing its warmth. He clicked a button on the console in front of him. The massive screen on the wall previously showing the Ethelred logo flickered to life. It displayed an expense report. "Let's talk about your results." Brenda Walsh stood up. "This is an expense report filed by Ms. Dubois for client gifts in December of last year. It includes a $15,000 charge for vintage jewelry from a boutique called Silken Thread. Our investigation found that Silken Thread ceased operations in 2019. It's one of dozens of such fraudulent claims." Genevieve's face went pale. Patrick began to fidget, his confident smirk vanishing. "And then there are the vendors," Dominic said, his voice dropping an octave. The screen changed to show the corporate logos of Prestige Automotive and Ellen Imports, two companies that have billed Ethelred for over $4 million in the last 2 years. Companies which our investigation has confirmed are owned by Genevieve's brother-in-law and Patrick's mother, respectively. The blood drained completely from Genevieve's face. She shot a panicked look at Patrick, who looked like he was about to be physically ill. This is a misunderstanding. A clerical error. Was it also a clerical error when you sourced counterfeit wine for Mr. Blackwood's suite and billed the company for the genuine article? Dominic pressed his eyes like chips of ice. Alistair Blackwood spoke up, his voice dripping with contempt. "I must admit I was curious. The 1982 Mouton Rothschild I was served had a rather pedestrian 2015 Californian bouquet. I had my own people look into it. A blatant fake. The trap had sprung." Genevieve and Patrick were caught, their faces a mask of horror and disbelief. But Dominic wasn't finished. This was merely the appetizer. "The theft is bad enough," he said, standing up and walking slowly around the table toward them. "But we've learned it was never just about the money, was it? The money was just grease for the wheels of a much larger betrayal." He clicked the remote again. The screen now showed network data logs, dates, times, and data packet sizes next to an IP address. "This is a record of data transfers from this building's secure network to an external server. A server belonging to Meridian Global Logistics." It was the final fatal blow. Genevieve gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Patrick slumped in his chair, utterly defeated. "Corporate espionage," selling our client data, our strategies, our future to our biggest rival. Dominic stated, his voice a low, condemning rumble. You two haven't just been stealing from this company. You've been committing treason against it. Genevieve, desperate, finally found her voice. This is insane. You have no proof. This is a conspiracy orchestrated by her. She pointed a trembling finger at Annalise. This so-called consultant, snooping around, twisting things. Who is she anyway? Dominic stopped directly behind Annalise's chair. He placed his hands gently on her shoulders. The room was deathly silent. That's an excellent question, Genevieve. It gets to the very heart of the matter, doesn't it? About who people are and why we should treat them with respect. Your entire fraudulent empire was nearly exposed weeks ago because of one small moment of casual cruelty. A moment that triggered this entire investigation. He looked directly into Genevieve's terrified eyes. You see, you were so busy preparing for your very important person that you failed to recognize one standing right in front of you. You ordered her to move a piece of luggage. You called her luggage help. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Genevieve Patrick, I'd like to formally introduce you to Dr. Annalise Thorne. He gave Annalise's shoulder a gentle squeeze. My wife. The reveal hit the room like a physical shockwave. Alistair Blackwood's eyebrows shot up in understanding. Brenda Walsh remained impassive, but there was a flicker of grim satisfaction in her eyes. For Genevieve and Patrick, it was a moment of pure, undiluted horror. Their minds frantically rewound to that day in the lounge. The woman in the simple clothes, the dismissive snap of the fingers, the condescending words. It all came crashing down on them, the catastrophic, career-ending, life-altering magnitude of their mistake. They hadn't just insulted a random traveler. They had humiliated the queen of the kingdom they were plundering. Patrick made a small, choking sound. Genevieve simply stared, her face a frozen mask of absolute ruin, as the woman she had called luggage help looked back at her, not with anger, but with a quiet, devastating pity. The silence that followed Dominic's revelation was absolute. It was the heavy, vacuum-like silence of a world collapsing. Genevieve Dubois stood frozen, the color of old parchment, her mind unable to process the chasm that had just opened beneath her feet. Patrick Keller had shrunk into his expensive suit, which now looked like a costume on a terrified child. Dominic's voice, when he spoke again, was devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of a judge passing an irrevocable sentence: security. As if on cue, the boardroom doors opened, and two broad-shouldered security guards entered the room. They were professional, impassive, and their presence instantly shifted the atmosphere from a corporate confrontation to a criminal proceeding. Ms. Dubois, Mr. Keller, your employment with Ethelred Logistics is terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct, fraud, and corporate espionage, Dominic stated formally. You will be escorted from the premises. Your personal effects will be packed and sent to you. You are not to touch your computers or phones. You are not to speak to any Ethelred employee. Is that understood? Genevieve finally snapped out of her stupor, a hysterical, desperate energy filling her. Dominic, Mr. Thorne, please, it was a mistake, a terrible lapse in judgment. I can fix this. I can fix this. Dominic's voice was laced with disbelief. You sold confidential company data to our direct competitor. You systematically defrauded this company for millions of dollars. And you fostered a culture so toxic it rotted my organization from the inside out. There is no fixing this. Your careers in this industry are over. One of the guards stepped toward Genevieve. She flinched back. You can't do this. It's already done, Dominic said coldly. Brenda, please coordinate with our legal department. I want a full civil suit filed by the end of the day to reclaim every single dollar that was stolen. And I want the complete file of your investigation, the fraud, the shell corporations, the data theft turned over to the district attorney's office. We will be pursuing criminal charges to the fullest extent of the law. The mention of criminal charges caused Patrick to let out a whimpering sob. The reality of prison, of a future utterly destroyed, was now crashing down upon him. He began to babble. It was her idea, all of it. She made me. I just did what I was told. Genevieve shot him a look of pure venom, her desperation curdling into rage. "You pathetic little worm." "Enough," Dominic commanded. The guards moved in, gently but firmly, taking each of them by the arm. As they were led towards the door, Genevieve's eyes, wild and pleading, found Annalise. "Please," she whispered the single word, a universe of regret. "I'm sorry. I had no idea." Annalise met her gaze, her expression one of sorrow, not triumph. "That was the entire problem, Genevieve," she said softly. "You had no idea. And you didn't care to." The guards escorted them out their walk of shame, past the glass-walled offices of their former colleagues. The news would spread through the tower like wildfire, a shocking cautionary tale. The karma that followed was swift and brutal, a real-life cascade of consequences. The civil suit from Ethelred drained them of every illicitly gained asset. The home Genevieve had bought with the kickback money, the luxury car Patrick leased, the designer clothes, it was all seized and liquidated. Their families implicated in the shell corporations were also dragged into the legal morass, facing their own financial ruin and public shame. The district attorney's office, armed with Brenda's meticulously documented evidence, brought a powerful case against them. Faced with overwhelming proof of wire fraud conspiracy and violations of the Economic Espionage Act, they both took plea deals to avoid longer sentences. Genevieve Dubois, the queen of the VIP lounge, was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Patrick Keller, due to his cooperation, received 18 months. Their professional reputations were not just tarnished, they were obliterated. News of the Ethelred scandal, with its juicy details of corporate spies brought down by the CEO's unassuming wife, became a minor sensation in business journals. Their names were blacklisted. No legitimate company would ever touch them again. Months later, a broken Patrick Keller, out on bail awaiting his sentence, was spotted working as a dispatcher for a local, low-budget taxi service. The irony lost on no one. Genevieve's brother-in-law, Martin Finch, saw his prestige automotive business collapse into bankruptcy, and he faced his own set of fraud charges. For Alistair Blackwood, the entire episode was a stunning revelation. After the disgraced pair had been removed from the boardroom, he had turned to Dominic. "That was the most incredible and terrifying board meeting I have ever attended," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. He then looked at Annalise with newfound respect. "And you, madam, have more steel in you than half the CEOs I know." He extended a hand to Dominic. "Your company has a serious cancer, Thorne. But you've just proven you have the guts to perform the surgery. You have my confidence. Let's talk about that investment. I believe we can make the deal significantly larger than originally planned. A company that values integrity this fiercely is a company I want to be in business with." The hard karma that had shattered Genevieve and Patrick's lives had in a strange twist solidified Ethelred's future, securing a massive investment and forging a powerful new alliance, all because of a single ugly moment of arrogance in the Apex Lounge. 6 months after the boardroom reckoning, the Ethelred Apex Lounge at JFK was a different place. The physical space was the same. The plush carpets, the panoramic views, the quiet hum of luxury. But the atmosphere had undergone a fundamental transformation. The fear was gone, replaced by a palpable sense of pride and professionalism. The catalyst for this change was now a permanent fixture in the company. Project Empathy had been rebranded as the Annalise Thorne Initiative, a mandatory ongoing training program for every single Ethelred employee from the boardroom to the baggage claim. It wasn't about trust falls or corporate jargon. It was about practical, real-world scenarios focused on the core principle that had been so brutally violated, every person deserves to be treated with dignity. Annalise herself, initially reluctant, had accepted a formal paid position as the initiative's executive director. She had discovered a new passion, one that complemented her art, the art of sculpting a better corporate culture. She split her time between her studio and the company, finding that the principles of balance, form, and integrity applied to both clay and corporations. Today, she was in the Apex Lounge, not as a traveler or an investigator, but as a mentor. She was speaking to a group of new management trainees. She wore her usual comfortable, stylishly simple clothes, but now everyone knew exactly who she was. And so the most valuable asset this company has isn't our fleet of aircraft or our proprietary software. She was saying, her voice warm and engaging. It's trust, the trust our clients place in us, and just as importantly, the trust we place in each other. That trust is built in small moments. A polite word, a helping hand offered freely, the simple act of seeing the person in front of you, not the uniform they wear or the title they hold. She walked them through the lounge, pointing out the changes. The staff had more autonomy. Their uniforms were redesigned for more comfort and practicality. A new bonus system was in place that rewarded exceptional acts of kindness and teamwork, not just profit margins. The young concierge, Ben, who had nervously told her about the fake wine, was now the assistant lounge manager, his confidence soaring. As her session with the trainees concluded, Dominic Thorne walked into the lounge. He wasn't there for an inspection. He was there to pick up his wife for lunch. He stood quietly at the back, watching her, a look of immense pride on his face. The trainees, seeing the CEO, stiffened slightly, but Annalise just smiled. "Don't worry," she said with a laugh. "He's with me." Dominic walked over, kissing her on the cheek. "Am I interrupting perfect timing?" "We were just wrapping up," she said. She turned back to the trainees. "Any final questions?" One young woman raised her hand. "Mrs. Thorne, the story about what happened here, is it true?" Annalise and Dominic exchanged a look. It was a story that had become legend within the company, a modern fable taught to every new hire. Annalise nodded. "Yes, it's true. And it's a hard lesson I hope none of you ever have to learn from either side. Your status, your title, your bank account. They are the most fragile things you own. They can be gone in an instant. But your character, the way you treat people when no one is watching, that is the only thing you truly possess. Make sure it's worth something." Later, Annalise and Dominic sat in her favorite corner, the one where she had been sketching that fateful day. It was their quiet moment before heading out. "You've changed this place," Annalise Dominic said, taking her hand. "You've changed the whole company. You made it better." "We did," she corrected him gently. "I was just the one they happened to call luggage help." She smiled, the memory no longer carrying a sting, but the weight of a lesson learned and a battle won. She looked out the vast window at a plane gracefully ascending into the blue sky. The Ethelred Apex Lounge was still a sanctuary for the elite, but it was no longer a kingdom of arrogance. It had been humbled, broken down, and rebuilt on a new foundation. A foundation of respect, and it was stronger than ever. There you have it. A story that proves that what you wear and how you look mean nothing compared to who you are. Genevieve and Patrick built their world on a rotten foundation of arrogance and deceit, and it came crashing down because they failed one simple human test. They judged a book by its cover and found out too late that it was the author. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about the inescapable nature of karma and the profound truth that integrity is the ultimate power. True strength doesn't come from a title or a designer suit, but from how you treat the person you think has nothing to offer you. If you love seeing arrogance get its overdue comeuppance, and believe that kindness and respect should always win the day, then show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We have many more stories of hard karma and real-life justice coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one. Thank you for listening.